Oh, no, 21, I'm
I
sorry.
don't know a lot of. All right, we'll call the meeting back to order. Is this guy taking pictures of us?
All right. Good morning, Mayor, City Council, Jacqueline Gibson, here with Community Development. Today, I'm going to go ahead and go over one of the outreach topics that was identified at your strategic planning workshop back in March earlier this year. It is accessory dwellings. Just for the public, I did provide a lot of reading material and resources in the green sheet with some hyperlinks. So if you'd like some leisurely reading, definitely some great resources to read that will help with this presentation if there's any questions. So today, just a brief overview of what accessory dwelling units are, our current city regulations that comprise both our accessory dwellings and accessory apartments. Overview of the current bills that are pending in both the Senate and in the House. A list of challenges and benefits that a community might face as one is contemplating changes or additional regulations for accessory dwelling units, and then a variety of next step options. So, accessory dwelling units, there's many different types of references to accessory dwelling units. They're accessory apartments, ADUs, granny flats, so a lot of different terminology, but essentially what it is, it's a secondary or ancillary housing unit to a primary dwelling unit. They typically have their own kitchen and bathrooms and living space, but they're located on the same lot. They are smaller than the main dwelling unit, and they can be attached to the main dwelling, they can be detached, they can be above a garage. So again, it's just a whole different variety of ways that these units can manifest. And below is a graphic from the AARP on what that might look like, just to illustrate those different types of modalities for those ADUs. City regulations, and in the handout there's this same table that we use to kind of help simplify the different regulations, and just some background on those. The downtown district regulations for accessory dwelling units was approved in 2020 based on the recommendations by DPZ co-design. And those regulations came from their experience on implementing form-based codes throughout the country. So that's why the regulations are so different, and I'll go over those distinctions shortly. Outside the downtown district, those regulations were created by Lee County in about 1994. And when the city incorporated, we went ahead and took over those regulations, and we've made very minimal changes ever since then. So the differences between the two: in the downtown district, ADUs are allowed in all the transects except for the Imperial River District. So that's the downtown project known as Imperial 41. They're regulated by the form-based code, and the size limitation is 800 square feet. We require in the downtown code that they share ownership and utility connections. And that was a way because we don't require additional impact fees. We do not require additional density counts, if you will. So an ADU in the downtown district does not penalize your count towards your density. So, but as part of that benefit is you have to connect to the main house for utilities. So water, power, and that helps facilitate possibly being used for elderly housing or some other lower income targeted household. They're supposed to have independent entries from an alley or sidewalk. For parking, they have to meet their own parking requirement. Again, they do not count towards density or impact fees. Again, a way to incentivize really building out our downtown. And for design standards, except for those elements where we're preempted to go ahead and regulate, we do regulate them for height, setbacks, glazing, which means your openings, so windows and doors, and then also the orientation of the unit. So we are able to control that. And the lot requirements are spelled out depending on which transect that ADU is wanting to locate in. And we do allow garage conversions in that portion of the code. Outside of our downtown, where we do allow those is specifically when the city created its own comprehensive plan, the city made sure that we allowed, they're known as accessory apartments outside of downtown. So they are specifically identified in our medium density residential land use classification. So in any category any color on the map in that designation, an accessory dwelling unit is allowed and was recognized as being a way to provide affordable housing. As we get into the zoning, which is your implementing regulations, where those units are allowed is in our TSC2 district, which is a duplex-like district that allows single-family or two-family attached. Your RM2 district, which is a residential multifamily district, which also allows single-family duplex and multifamily units, and also our RM6, which is also a residential multifamily district. In terms of our RS1 district, which is our single-family residential districts, those are only allowed by special exception. And it appears that the county predecessors at the time felt that residential single-family neighborhoods should be treated differently. So the use, it's not that it's not allowable, it's just that it has to go through a special exception criteria process. It's a public hearing process where the request is reviewed and analyzed against your special exception criteria to determine if it is appropriate based on those conditions. The accessory apartments are regulated by a specific section of our code. They can be attached to the main dwelling unit, but they are restricted in size. It can't be greater than 50% of the main dwelling. If it's detached, it's capped at 500 square feet or 50% of the main dwelling unit. So those are some distinctions that are different. They may share ownership and utility connections. So it's not required in this section. An independent entry is recommended. We want to make sure that it retains a single-family look to preserve character. They must provide parking to accommodate both the single-family dwelling and also the accessory apartment. It does count towards density, and they do pay an impact fee. The impact fee is at our multifamily rate, which is it's a lower impact fee rate than your single-family rate. But we do collect those fees because we do anticipate it will have an impact on the infrastructure. They too must also maintain a single-family residential appearance, and they must conform to the lot standards of the zoning district of which they're in. So that is also unique. And they cannot exceed lot coverage. So each zoning district has specific setbacks, it has specific lot coverage. So if an owner is looking to add an accessory apartment, they have to maintain all of their code compliant requirements. And garage conversions are allowed as long as they meet their setback requirements. And all these permits are required to get a residential building permit through the building department, and they all are required to get drainage plans.
So, Jackie, if it's a garage conversion, wouldn't the garage already have met the setback, or is it a different setback because it's going to be an ADU?
It should meet its setback, but sometimes you can have a detached garage that would need to meet setback requirements. Detached garages,
But if it was already built?
if it's already built, yes, and I would say, well, we actually did have an application that came in recently where there was an existing carport that was older, and they wanted to convert the carport into additional living space. And if you increase the nonconformity, then in those instances, if you convert an existing carport into a dwelling unit, we could see that as an increase in a nonconformity that would thereby not be allowed.
So the carport was
Non-conforming,
not in the, it was.
right, in that
close to the-
instance.
It didn't meet the setbacks. So.
Correct.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's rare, far and few in between, but it could happen.
Okay.
So, Florida statutes, there is existing statutory regulations for accessory dwelling units. That was created, I believe, around 2011, and that was in recognition, in recognizing that the state of Florida we're a very desirable community. There is an affordability concern. So what the state did is they adopted the section of statute for accessory dwelling units that encouraged local governments to adopt ordinances to allow accessory dwelling units. And they allowed that in any area zoned for single-family residential use. And again, it was a may. It definitely was an encouraging piece of legislation. The caveat is when that unit would come in for a building permit, they had to sign an affidavit that would run with the land and the permit that unit would be used for affordable housing, to be used at, and in the state legislature, in the statute, we do have very specific definitions of what affordable is. So there's different categories, and they're listed there for extremely low, low income, very low income, or moderate income persons. So that unit had to be rented out to someone that met that status. So again, at building permit, the idea is that an affidavit would be signed and that permit would be issued, and then that permit or that dwelling unit would be used for that purpose. Hopefully it would be used for that purpose. If not, it then becomes an enforcement matter. But that's what existing legislation does allow. And two, it would allow for local governments to utilize that type of dwelling unit to meet your affordable housing requirements in the comprehensive plan. So the state legislature, for comprehensive plan, we do have a housing element, and part of that housing element is it asks, how are you, city, meeting your affordable housing goals? So with us, our current policies are we partner with other nonprofits to meet our affordable housing goals. Accessory dwelling units is another form that's accepted as an affordable housing offering. So again, if ADUs are allowed, they're rented out to an affordable party, that could be seen as meeting your affordable housing goals as mandated by the state.
Laura?
So it's attached to my house. I would think that I would get to define what affordable is, and the person accepting the definition would then, so the state is defining what I can charge?
So under current legislation, this is an encouraging piece of legislation. It's not a requirement. So this was a way to encourage local governments to go ahead and adopt land use regulations to support accessory dwelling units. And then if someone did go that route, then an affidavit would be required. Under current legislation, that will be repealed. And that's not part of the requirement, giving a property owner more choice. So we'll go over those changes next.
And that was only to help out with affordable housing.
Correct.
Like, so they could rent it at a higher rate to somebody else, but it wouldn't count as affordable housing.
So impact fees would be different, or what would be the?
We'll have that discussion. That's really going to be council's choice. That's a policy decision. So we definitely have that as a question to seek some direction. Because it's different throughout the state and the country. All right, so Senate Bill 48. Just going to give you an overview. That is the current bill that is passing or going through the Senate right now. It does have a companion bill, House Bill 313. For all intents and purposes, they are generally the same. This is essentially the second attempt at getting something like this passed. We think that it may actually pass next year. So in anticipation of that, we'll just go ahead and hit the high notes based on what we know today. I don't know if there's going to be any additions as it moves through other committees. So we'll just go on what we have based on the November version. So if it passes and is signed by the governor, it would be effective July 1st, 2026. So it would retroactively apply based on when we adopt the ordinance that we would be mandated to pass. But the key elements of the bill that's most appropriate for community development's purposes and seeking your direction today is that it now changes that language that I told you about may to must. So local governments would be required to enact an ordinance, and we would have to adopt it by December 1st, 2026. And what the language says is that it would allow accessory dwelling units in all areas zoned for single-family residential. And what that allows local governments to do is that allows us to regulate the permitting, construction, and the use of the accessory dwelling units with specific exceptions. And Dwight had asked, well, what are those specific exceptions at this time? The exceptions, and I'll label them as prohibitions or preemptions, it essentially does not allow for a local government to regulate a lease term of the ADU, with the exception of they can't be less than 1 month. And again, there's existing legislation already that preempts local governments from regulating short-term rentals. So really no difference there, and we have really no power to mandate a lease term, except if it's less than 30 days. That's not what this legislation is that's not the purpose of this legislation. It does.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, if you could clarify, this legislation, how does it affect gated communities and HOAs who already have restrictions?
Yeah, at this time, I do not see anything in the bill that's addressing those deed restrictions. I would say in the model ordinance by AARP, sometimes there is some language about that, but I do not see any language that the state has put, or the legislature has put in this bill to go ahead and preempt any of those authorities.
And do you see that as a problem for our community? Or does staff, I should say, see that as a problem for our community?
The way it's drafted now, I don't think gated communities would be impacted because their deed restrictions would still prevail. That's how I read it, but we can coordinate with legal counsel to make sure that's how they see it too.
I mean, if you live in an HOA and a deed, that's a contract.
Mhm.
The legislature is limited and also refrains generally from trying to invalidate existing contracts, because there's a number of legal issues that can come into play. So one of the biggest ones being that if you frustrate the purpose of the contract by invalidating portions of it, you may validate the entire contract. And so I suspect that the HOA lobby will be keeping an eye on these issues and prevent any concerns reaching into those communities. It doesn't mean that if we adopt an ordinance that goes forward in time that says when a project, development comes in, that the city can't make conditions on that to allow those types of housing units within even a deed restricted community.
So require the developer to allow ADUs as part of their,
That could be something that's on the slate of options.
thank you both.
Our ordinance also cannot require that the property owner reside in the principal unit. We cannot increase parking requirements that otherwise could accommodate an additional car for that dwelling unit in the driveway without impeding the access to the main unit. And then we also can't require replacement parking if a garage or carport is converted. I have some questions on that one because from an operational standpoint, I could see where there would be a deficiency, so we might need to get some more clarification on that. Because oftentimes a garage or a carport could be used to meet the parking requirement of the code. So that one preemption gives me a little pause to make sure we're not creating some other type of issue from a functional standpoint or a code inconsistency. Other elements of the bill, again, not really in our purview for creating an ADU ordinance, but they do touch on tenant screening reports. And from what I understand in reading the post-bill backup, which also was linked in the agenda, is that it's if we have rental applicants that are applying through various places to live, it costs money for them to, do those tenant screenings. So it would allow them to use one report within a certain time frame if they're applying at multiple locations. So again, really doesn't impact us for creating our ordinance. Also, there's language in there about homesteads. So essentially, it again doesn't really impact us. But what the state is saying is that a property owner that builds an ADU cannot be denied a homestead exemption for owner-occupied primary dwelling unit. But if they are renting out that accessory dwelling unit to another person, then that accessory dwelling unit could be taxed accordingly. Again, probably more so something for the property appraiser to keep an update on. There's also a requirement by the Office of Program Policy Analysis, Government Accountability, a group up at the state where they want to go ahead and do an evaluation of mezzanine financing or other short-term debt options to help stimulate the construction of accessory dwelling units. And then also they want to evaluate if tiny homes should also be considered for meeting affordable housing needs. So we'll keep eyes on that. But that's just an evaluation, so future legislation could come out of that requirement. Accessory dwelling units, challenges and benefits. The two links that I provided in the backup, the Florida Housing Coalition and the AARP, has some really great source materials. If the public or council would like to look at those further. So what I did is, based on those materials, I created this chart outlining benefits and challenges and other things that we as a local government should consider as we continue to research and evaluate changes in the future legislation. Some of the benefits are that accessory dwelling units could be viewed as a great affordable housing tool. It introduces different dwelling unit types into existing neighborhoods. We're not concentrating lower income housing in one area, so it really disperses those units throughout the landscape and creates great housing choice. Again, it is eligible to meet our housing goals as mandated by the state in our comprehensive plan, so that's another benefit. It does subsidize costs for homeowners, whether or not they choose to live in the dwelling unit themselves, or if they're going to rent it out for supplemental income. So that was viewed as a benefit to both a homeowner and generating additional revenue to offset costs. Again, it promotes mixed income neighborhoods by spreading out dwelling units throughout the landscape. It's taking advantage of existing infrastructure, which then goes into being more environmentally conscious because we're promoting more infill development than greenfield development to accommodate housing needs. Some of the challenges that communities often face when one is contemplating an accessory dwelling unit ordinance is oftentimes there are property owners that have illegal accessory dwelling units that can give lawful accessory dwelling units a not so good reputation. So a lot of the literature goes ahead and explains that sometimes there's amnesty programs or additional incentive programs that are available to help identify unlawful accessory dwelling units and to bring them into compliance to address some of those concerns. But I know just being here in the city, we have seen some unlawful accessory dwelling units where someone converts a shed into living space, which is not a lawful accessory dwelling unit. So we are aware of those challenges where that helps with the negative connotation with accessory dwelling units. Other challenges are we can't regulate the rental lease term. And again, we're preempted by the state already on short-term rentals. So it does make it a challenge if our goal is to allow accessory dwelling units to help with a disabled population, elderly population, or affordable population. If we can't regulate anything less than 1 month lease, what goal or what segment of the market are we really helping? So that is a challenge. Also the challenge is I don't know with some of the existing statute what we're allowed to regulate and what we can't. We have Senate Bill 180 that doesn't allow us to adopt more restrictive regulations. We also have other regulations that say we can't design single-family residences. So there's certain things we have to kind of look into some more to see what we can and cannot regulate. Again, there's a misunderstandings of what accessory dwelling units are and what their potential benefits are. And I think a lot of that is because of the unlawful accessory dwelling units. The other considerations as we move forward in determining changes to our ordinances is how do we address neighborhood compatibility and concerns? And a lot of...
I think Nigel had another question.
I want to wait until she's done, if you don't mind, Mike.
And so those concerns, in most cases, you do address by site design elements. So it's the location of the unit, the size of the unit, and the aesthetic appearance of the unit. Oftentimes, that's what other jurisdictions are doing to help with compatibility concerns. So they can weave those units into existing neighborhoods and into the urban fabric. Other considerations are density considerations. If we really want to encourage these for affordable housing, do we count it as a dwelling unit or do we not? Some of the literature suggests if you really want to encourage the accessory dwelling unit, you don't count density. But that's a question for the council to decide. I think it's in our purview, and it doesn't look like the state requires us to feel one way or the other. Other considerations is it's one accessory dwelling unit per lot. And I think that's very appropriate. Some other jurisdictions cap occupancy. So based on square footage, is it so many people per unit? Do we just refer to Florida Building Code or International Property Maintenance Code? So you can look at capping occupancy. And then the other consideration is just your permit fees, your impact fees, water, wastewater fees. So are we mandating that they share utilities so they can share on costs? Do we charge impact fees? Do we not charge impact fees? There's some language in the support materials that say maybe we require land use restriction agreements that run with the land that can then further dictate the use of that accessory dwelling unit. So things to consider and what other jurisdictions have done as they evaluated accessory dwelling units in their area. Nigel, do you have a question?
Yeah, Deb, would you go back to page 7, please, Jackie? Because I just want to understand this clearly myself. So the prohibitions, preemption, thank you. The requirement that the property owner reside in the primary dwelling, we cannot require that, correct?
Under the current state law.
Okay, so this is
Under
because
state law.
good old sunshine law, just for all of you. I don't know how many of you have had calls about this. I've had 7 or 8. All of them have been, most of them people I know, they do not live in Bonita Springs, but they own properties in Bonita Springs, and they are very excited about ADUs. None of them brought up the idea that they want to help us with low income. I'm just looking at this, and we're already going to be prohibited from the owner living on the property. So, I mean, I know God save us from good intentions, but I have concerns. And has anybody else had any calls on this? Just out of curiosity?
I have not, but I have concerns also.
I've had people who are in favor of them in as a generality, and I am too, as a generality. I'm not overly concerned with. I mean, I feel like if that becomes an issue, maybe we can address it. I don't really feel like that's really. I don't know what percentage of the people who are doing that are actually going to go live in the little house and be like, okay, here's the big one. Like, I mean,
I know what I'm talking about, Jess, is folks that the property they own already is an investment property.
right.
They're going to double their income. That's the way they're looking at it.
Right.
And so I look at the character of our community that is not gated, not an HOA.
Right.
It's going to change the character of those communities. I'm concerned about that. And then I look at a gentleman in the back of the room, and I'm just wondering how many more folks we're going to need in code enforcement because, and I won't bring it up in our summaries from meetings, but the TDC meeting this week, the difficulty in collecting revenues for the city and enforcing, it's a nightmare. And the cities that have these already in place, they don't have an answer. So however we can address this carefully, but it sounds like we're just not going to have a lot of choices here, unless I've missed the boat.
Chris?
I think you're right, Nigel. We're not going to have a lot of choices. And so what I suggest is that we need to treat the December 1st, 2026 date as a hard deadline.
Agreed.
And that what we need to do is start a calendar-driven work plan that addresses legal planning, permitting, and communications, and not a wait and see. We got less than 11 months to get ready. And so what all that work would lead to is following the legislation bills that are in the House and Senate and attempting to draft a ADU ordinance that is compliant on day one. So I think we have to take it seriously. I think there's policy issues that we have some control over, but I think we need to, the reality is we've got to look at this as a hard deadline, and it's not work that we can wait until the last minute to try to undertake. So that would be my recommendation, is to start on the process of doing the work to be able to draft a compliant ordinance that's effective on day one of this. And if we don't need it, then we don't need it. But you don't want to get to July hoping the governor is going to veto the legislation, or that the legislature is going to not get the bill passed, because if you wait that long, you got too much work to do.
Staff has too much work to do. Thanks, Chris. And I want to make it clear, I'm not against ADUs. I just want to be the devil's advocate here, and I'm hoping some of the rest of you will join me in being devil's advocates. What are the unintended consequences of this, and how careful we need to be? And yeah, I mean, staff is going to have the burden here, so sooner than later. And I'm sure that Derek's already got some great ideas in mind as to what we can do.
Well,
Not that I'm throwing that on you, Derek.
yeah, the issue really is, and I think you've all addressed it. You know, we already see what the market demand is. It's for second home. It's for the homes that code enforcement deals with, and we see that on all the beach communities. We see that everywhere, and quite frankly, that's everywhere along the coast in Florida where the ADUs are needed. In the interior of Florida, where the ADUs aren't needed, there's not people trying to sneak, extra units in their garage. The problem I think we're going to have with crafting an ordinance is that this ordinance is going to be balanced against Senate Bill 180. So if we're trying, the way the legislation is right now, it says once it goes into effect, we have to adopt an ordinance. It isn't really clear that it says ADUs are free and clear from day one of the effective date. The problem will be crafting anything that we can put into place and question about how that's going to affect with Senate Bill 180. So we already have ADU provisions. Anything we do to make them more restrictive is going to be invalid. So we're going to have to mesh that with the bill that gets adopted ultimately. That's going to be, I think, where we're going to have the single biggest issue. And I do think from if you look at the status of ADU legislation across the country, California has been pushing this for a while because they've seen the same kind of zoning restrictions. I don't know whether it's NIMBYism or it's policies or what's driving it, but they've had huge percentage increases in ADUs over the last 10 years, but not very many actually built. There's just percentage increases. So the biggest problem I've seen in looking at the bills that they've gone through is the same issue we're going to deal with, which is the retroactive effect, putting these into existing houses, because contractors will meet with people, have an existing home, say, I'll build this for you, and once they get into the morass of all the other, and I'm not even going to say it, local legislation, the building code, the FEMA regulations, the 50% rule, as they start to get into this, these projects cost far more than the return on the investment. I think where we should really focus on is, we're going to have to deal with the issues that Tony's already dealing with, but finding a way to encourage ADUs in new development is probably the place where it's cleanest, because that will be, brand new development. We can address all the building out issues will be resolved immediately. It'll be something that we can deal with. There won't be any setback issues. All that will be very simple, and so that may be where we could try to encourage the use easier, and add incentives and other things. But when I look at this bill, what I see is this is just an attempt to get duplexes in single-family districts, and I think it'll increase the pricing of housing in general. But that said, every new unit is opening space for someone else. So, the affordability issue, everything we've seen with the legislature the last couple of years has been, I'm sorry, no, I'm not talking to the microphone, has been trying to deal with the supply side of supply and demand. They've been trying to increase supply, and so when they work on the affordability side, they're trying to subsidize demand. That doesn't work out so well. So I think from our perspective, it'll be very easy to draft an ordinance for future development. I think we're going to have a real difficult time dealing with the past development, and we're going to have almost no chance of doing anything that regulates the actual use, because we're going to have overlap between Senate Bill 180, and we're going to have overlap with the bills for vacation rentals. I mean, so they haven't addressed any of that in any of the bills, how these regimes all interplay together to prevent us from regulating the issues. So it's not going to be fun.
Jim?
Yes, Derek, you've addressed the issues that I have. One, the discussion of ADUs has centered around providing more affordable workforce housing within our areas with the existing lots and single-family homes that we have in our community. And what I see, if I make sure I understand what I hear, is that one, we can't limit the terms of a lease. So the encouragement is for any property owner is that clearly you'll take the high season rate and be able to do that for 3 or 4 months and not worry about renting for the full year and providing housing sources for workforce. 2 is the limit on rental rates in terms of affordability for workforce housing. So again, the objectives that we've talked about ADUs in the past over the last year, I think quite honestly centered around providing more workforce housing, that a lot of these things do not necessarily support that direction. Lastly, I would want to verify, Jackie, really from your end, is that assuming that it's required we move forward, is that existing county and state sales tax and tourist development fees and so forth that are assessed today would continue to be required, that the ADU would be registered with the state, that sales tax would be collected, and for anything rented less than 6 months would be subject to the 10 or 11% that is charged on the rent. Is that correct?
So we do have our existing rental ordinance in chapter 12. I'm gonna look back at Tony, where you don't need to get a rental permit if you're paying those appropriate taxes and fees. We in this office don't enforce that, but they should be paying their proper tourist development taxes, and and especially if they want to be registered as a lodging establishment through the state. Otherwise, they're supposed to go through our program to get a rental permit, and then we go ahead and do our inspections and whatnot. But from what I understand, they're supposed to be paying their proper taxes.
I did. And we rented our unit that we owned a couple of years ago and so forth, and anyone less than 6 months was subject to the base sales tax rate plus a tourist fee or whatever that was on top that was close to 11 or 12% for anything less than 6 months rental. So is that something that, quite honestly, with what your understanding is that if we're in the drafting of an ordinance, can we go ahead and mandate that rental agreement as part of the permitting process? The M word is a dangerous word here, but
I think, like Derek had said, it because of the way the state has preempted our authority on short-term rentals, which directly correlates with our rental ordinance. Whatever language we would be putting in, we don't want to jeopardize losing any vesting, I would say, that we have on our existing rental ordinance. So Derek, I guess depending on how that is crafted into the legislation, we just want to make sure that we wouldn't be jeopardizing the current rental ordinance.
I would say we'll wait and see how that goes. What we're probably going to have to do, though, and I know that different tax collectors in different parts of the state operate differently. Some of them, they go on Zillow and Nextdoor, and they actively look for listings and cross-reference them against, So I think what we're going to have to do is we may have to enforce our own rental ordinance and whatever else gets developed, we may have to work in better cooperation with our local tax collector to find ways to enforce that and drive either payment of the taxes that get remitted back to us or people to pursue our rental program.
yeah, because my concern is following the law. I register our property, registered it as income, offset my expenses, all other wonderful stuff. And I filed my quarterly sales tax or whatever it was that I had to go ahead and do while it was a rental. And I guess from my end is that if we're going to open up this category, how do we ensure the integrity of the process?
Yeah, I was going to say, I should have brought up the fact that actually our local tax collector, Mr. Carnes, made the presentation at the TDC meeting, and the comment was difficulty in enforcing it. And this may shock you, Jim.
No.
But not everyone's as honest as you. And some folks aren't paying anything, or they're not paying their fair share. And one of the things that does happen, people are required to come in and provide the lease. But then in finding some enforcement actions, what they provided the city or county was not the same as what they were charging their renters.
Okay.
The enforcement part is going to be the hardest part, and that means more staff.
And on top of that, I mean, at the end of the day, when we're talking more staff, like, we don't need to create a larger issue than we have as a preventative measure if it means adding staff. If you talk to Tony, how many is this a significant enough of an issue that we're going to employ more people to deal with it? Or is this an issue that we're worried about? Because the reality is 90% of Bonita is in well, I don't want to say 90, 65% of Bonita is in a HOA. So this doesn't even apply to them anyways. So they shouldn't even be worried about it. The people in the middle, the two districts in the middle are the only ones who should even care, honestly. Because the rest of them are immune from it anyways.
And we should care.
Yes.
Well, I don't know that,
1 second, Chris. Jamie, you had a-
Yeah, I may think everybody has a very valid point, and I could be wrong on this, but a lot of the neighborhoods and such that I'm thinking of, you have to have room to be able to put this on the piece of property. And I feel like we have a couple districts that do have the room, but in most areas that, I'm thinking off the top of my head, there's not room on, you have the house and not a lot of property around it to be able to put one on that. So, I mean, we can look at it that way too. I mean, we have a lot of HOAs, and then we have gated communities, and then houses that are just built pretty much right next to each other where there's not room for one. But there are a lot of properties, and like my district alone, where they could serve as having that. So just a thought too of concern of it being a big concern as to where this would actually work and fit into the neighborhoods.
Oh, Jesse's in my district, and then, of course, where you live, there are lots that can easily accommodate an extra dwelling. So that's again my concern about changing, the culture, the character of Bonita Springs. Not that our gated communities don't provide character and obviously revenues, but when you look at what is Bonita Springs, it's our areas, and it's going to change.
Chris?
just going to point out that District 4, for example, that's where the push to have this discussion and workshop comes from, north of Shangri-La Road.
Yeah,
And
Bonita this year, so my bad, dude.
Yeah. So, anyway, I would say there's more homes that could benefit from an ADU than one might think.
Okay. So my direction is staff slide, because this is such a complicated and multifaceted issue before us. Is we definitely think additional presentations, requesting your feedback is important. We do understand that there's some public participants that would love for you to take some action on some items immediately in terms of the different regulations between outside form-based code regulations and outside form-based code regulations on characteristics and size of dwelling units, accessory dwelling units. That is council's pleasure. And then too, as we move forward, with any coordination with Dr. Banyan's team, in our office, we'll definitely make sure we're looking at these issues and concerns that were addressed today in crafting regulations for the future. So
I just want to add one thing, just to be clear, the bill, you have it in your packet. It doesn't really require us to do much. So the city already has ADU or an ADU ordinance. The only requirement to meet the requirements of December 2026 is that we look through those ordinances and we take out any of the provisions that are contrary. So that we can do without question. And because the ordinance itself is prospective, it can only apply to new construction. I think the issues particularly, as Dwight's brought up for years, the issues that for existing home, that's going to be the difficult situation to deal with, and that's really going to involve, maybe identifying neighborhoods that we can target. It's going to identifying lot sizes. We're going to need to be able to bring building department in. We're going to have to deal with flood issues. We're going to have to deal with a lot of the issues, and so it may be necessary at that point to do a parallel tract where we amend one ordinance and then we develop one for going forward and one for existing properties, because it just may be too difficult to figure all that out without trapping people. And the last thing I think anyone wants to do is get people excited. They go out and hire a contractor and then spend, months, if not years, trying to make something they thought would work work out. And we've seen a lot of that with, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the program, but the program for the energy savings where the state and all the local governments adopted programs for you to get, a new roof and new solar and the PACE program. And we saw all, the well-meaning program get bogged down in all sorts of contractor issues and practical situations. So I
And
think we-
abuses.
Yeah, and so I think you just need to be careful.
But something that we should move forward with and, try to stay ahead of
Well, we have to,
the game, so.
no choice.
Okay.
Cool.
Sounds good.
And as a reminder, this was one of the priorities we'd worked with Dr. Banyan as part of the process of the scoping, so you approved us to continue to work on that earlier as well.
Thank you, Jackie.
We now have a brief presentation by Community Development on their activity reports for November.
Very brief, I think it is.
Run, John, run.
20 seconds.
Yeah.
Remember the Micro Machine commercials? Those.
Hello.
You have it in your packets.
All right, good job.
November is not a surprise. With Thanksgiving, we're in December, permit activity was generally down. Conversely, wait times in the lobby were up a little bit. We had some permit technicians sick. We're not immune from influenza. If I had to guess, we're going to see basically the same pattern for December, and it will also continue to a certain extent into January. As we start to get second, third week, fourth week in January, we're going to start to see things picking back up again. Right now, our biggest issue is everybody that's trying to get things done before they come back down for the higher part of the season. So other than everything needs to be done yesterday, the volumes tend to be down a little bit. Any questions?
Sounds good.
Is that brief enough?
Good job.
Perfect.
Good job.
Thank you. I just have a couple quick announcements. As a reminder, our next meeting is January 21st, and we have moved that meeting to 5:30 p.m. in regards to the continuing of the adoption of some zoning requests. Also, on Friday, December 19th, Bonita Springs Community Policing is having their annual Shop with a Cop. They have participants from the administration as well, and students from Bonita Springs Elementary, Spring Creek Elementary, Oak Creek Charter, and Bonita Springs Elementary. Additionally, they have outreach to some special needs students at Bonita High School and Bonita Middle. If you'd like to participate, that will be 3 p.m. at Target in Coconut Point Mall. Cafe of Life is having their annual toy distribution on December 20th. It starts at 10 a.m., but I believe Santa's arriving around 9:30. And parking is tight there if you'd like to go to Lightner Creek Park and provide that support as well. And that concludes my report. Should we have a need for the first meeting in January, or we would look to that second week, and we would give notice ahead of time that we have any zoning issues or concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mayor and council member reports. Jim.
First of all, to the public and so forth, and fellow council members, I wish a happy Hanukkah, a Merry Christmas, and may 2026 be a most blessed and prosperous year for all. I do want to go ahead and thank the participation and support in the Wreaths Across America in the Bonita Springs Cemetery held this past Saturday. Thank you to my fellow council members that were there. Particularly to the tradition that's been carried forward by the Daughters of America Revolution, the neighboring communities of the cemetery, which have maintained and improved that overall quality, honoring our dead. Over 150 wreaths were placed on veterans who have served or given their life in honor of our country. So that's my report.
Thank you, Jim. Nigel?
Thanks, Mike. Echoing Jim's comments to my fellow council members, staff, especially staff, and our community. Best wishes for a safe and happy holiday. I'm not going to steal Andy Thunder, Mike, but I certainly hope you're going to talk about something today. And finally, I know it's sad, but I believe you sent out the information on Alex Grant's wife's funeral. So our former council member who lost his wife, I believe the funeral service is Saturday. So if you can attend, he's He's a character, but he's also been a big part of our community.
Thank you. Chris?
Last council meeting, I referenced the easement term sheets that received from the Seminole Gulf Railroad. In the intervening period, those term sheets have been evaluated by Collier County, Bonita Springs, and Estero, and we're acting together as a group. And it was concluded that an easement would not satisfy the needs of any of the governments. And so we are in the process of rejecting those term sheets and suggesting that we're still interested in pursuing the right-of-way and would be pleased to listen to something else other than an easement. I think that Estero and Collier County are really pushing for a straight fee simple purchase. Whether or not the railroad is interested in doing that, I don't know. I don't think there's going to be a need for a January workshop because right now we don't have anything to discuss. So that's where things stand. We're sort of at a interim stopping point and waiting on the railroad to see what they want to do now that we've rejected their easement term sheets. So I just wanted to fill you in on that.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and go. I want to thank everybody for their support with the 10,000 cards for the troops. We were challenged by Fort Myers Beach Mayor, and they were shooting for 5,000 cards. They got over 8,000. But we got 12,746 cards. Thank you to... Thank you to everyone on staff. The council members, I know, brought in quite a few cards. Arlene, I know your hand's probably sore from signing a lot of cards still. And I do want to do, a letter to everybody, thanking them. But also, we had help from the Bonita Springs High School JROTC. They did nearly 800 cards after doing, I think, 700 cards for another organization first. They did nearly another 800 for us. Heaven Sent Florist and For Heaven Shakes. The Magnus family of businesses, Rooftop at Riverside, Bonita Storage, Beach Storage. John R. Wood. I think at the rec center, was it the yoga group did quite a few cards, or? Okay, the stretch and tone class. Thank you to all them. Historical Society, Sugar Shack, Paradise Food Tours, Elizabeth Valdez brought in many cards. And then thank you to my family members that, kind of went above and beyond for me. I know my parents did over 1,000 cards. My aunts and uncles did over 1,000 cards. Some of their co-workers helped out too. So thank you to everybody for the cards. We did it. So, but it's probably going to be harder next year, so.
Bonita Springs Charter School.
Oh yeah, and Bonita Springs Charter School.
And the middle school.
And the middle school provided cards. Even the YMCA and the YMCA Early Learning Center, the little kids made cards too. So thank you to everybody. I'm sure I'm still missing a few that I forgetting to thank, but great job and appreciate all the help. I attended the Hanukkah celebration the other day with Councilwoman Carr, and also the Estero Mayor Joanne Ribble and school board member Bill Ribble. Great event there, especially with the tragedy that happened that morning. And then I was at the comp plan workshop last night. Thank you to Dr. Banyan for being there and answering all those tough questions from the crowd. And then I had to run to Bonita Springs High School, had their open house for school choice last night, and it was very well attended. So I think they're going to have a large freshman class next year too. So, and I would like to wish everybody a happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and a very happy and prosperous New Year. So, thank you. Laura?
Well, I think the card drive is a statement of our community really coming together. I mean, we rocked. And downtown businesses all over. So there's really this community connectivity going on, which is wonderful. And we heard a lot of interesting new exhibits are going to happen at the Wonder Gardens. But across the street, last week, Barron Collier had its groundbreaking for Imperial Crossings, and it was wonderful. And so it's very exciting. The seawall is up, and they replaced the whole seawall, and it'll be, I really think, a dramatic impact on downtown. Rabbi Greenberg was terrific at his celebration of light, despite the horrific acts in Australia and even in Rhode Island at Brown University. At FDOT, we did the 25-year plan, and the goal, as always, is 0 fatalities on our roads. Following that, every single day, there were multiple fatalities on our highways in Florida. And it's sort of sad that there's this sense of, I don't know. And we looked at the statistics. In August, it spikes. Well, why in August does it spike? Well, kids go to school. They start school and people forget, and then, you know, you're behind a school bus and you're like, oh, I've got to get to what? To the light? Stop. Don't drive distracted. And every school bus has a camera. Tickets are now being issued. Thank you to Denise Carlson, our new superintendent. Over 800 tickets were issued. People, after warnings, 2,000 were issued, but 800 tickets. People passed school buses with blinking lights and the bar down, cameras, and it's a $225 fine. And the next one, you get points and even an increased fine. So don't race to the stop sign or to the light. Take time and drive focused. And the real winners of the card drive are troops. And we thank them all. And Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah to everyone.
Thank you. Jesse?
Merry Christmas, everybody. I'm not going to keep anybody between lunch any longer. I just want to say one last thing, and that is a very happy birthday to Mayor Gibson yesterday.
That's right.
So we forgot to mention that, so I wanted to make sure that we recognize that as well. So that's all I've got.
Thank you. Jamie?
Yeah, I think everyone's pretty much touched on the things I was going to say. But I do want to say thank you to all the staff, council, community development. This year's been, the most difficult year of my life, and you guys have all been there for me, and the support has been amazing, and I can't thank everybody enough. And I want to wish everyone a safe and happy holiday season.
Thank you, too. All right, public comment.
We have one speaker slip. Barb Bryan, come forth. State your name when you reach the lectern.
Yeah, thank you very much, Barb Bryan. I'm in District 5. I'd like to come back to the ADU issue one more time. And we have received, my husband and I are constructing one. We've gotten the pre-approval letter. I'd really like to thank community development. We've had several really good conversations with Amber Andrade and Jay Sweet on what we can do and what we can't do. But I guess what I'd like to do is I still feel when I hear the discussion among city council, I don't know what the data is, and I apologize if the data already exists. How many ADUs do we already have? How many do you expect in the future? Because for me, I think we're actually kind of conflating two issues. One are the construction requirements that are required, and then are the renting issues that you're all talking about. So I guess what I would argue for is, can we settle the construction issues, because in Jackie's presentation, there are differences across all the districts. The only tweak I would be, we're in District 5, it's 500 square feet or 50% of the house, whichever is less. So we're automatically grandfathered into the 500 square feet, which is considerably less than what's required or allowed in District 1. So two things. I'd argue for some environmentally based standard and consistency across all the districts. I understand the HOAs and the planned communities might be set aside, fine, but whether it's a percent of impervious area or something that actually was also on one of Jackie's slides about the constraints and the environmental considerations, there was an environmental note on that last slide. So if we looked at optimizing on some environmental factor to allow, you know, rainwater to permeate into the ground and not deplete our groundwater, that to me seems like something that ought to be addressed. So that's number one. Number two, and I understand the desire to use ADUs for affordable housing, but it almost sounds from the discussion that we're trying to solve our affordable housing issue on the back of ADUs. So why are the rent restrictions for ADUs any different than the rent restrictions for your primary house? And I don't know why we're doing separate restrictions for rental properties off your primary residence. As we heard from Nigel, and I think you're the ones you're hearing from, is they're not living in that primary house anyway. So there are rental restrictions already, I presume. Why are they any different? Why are we having this discussion any different for ADUs than what is already allowed citywide? So I guess coming back, I'd adopt the same regulation that's in the downtown district across all areas of the city. And then just for going forward, could we solve the construction issues and the regulations and then deal with how you want to handle the rental rather than conflating those two issues?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other public comment?
Ben Hershenson, Avonlea Drive. You know, the holiday of Hanukkah goes for 8 days. So this is day 4. I'm obligated to say thank you for the gift of, unexpected gift of being chair of this new committee. I hope it doesn't turn into a lump of coal for you folks. But I'm really grateful for your confidence. I have a couple of comments to make about ADUs, and I'll be brief, and that is ADUs have a place. The question is where and what. I'm glad for Councilor Fullock to bring that up. It's a horrible nightmare for an HOA. I have an unusual HOA. I think I've seen it all over all the years I've been president. And I know somehow, somewhere, someone's going to ask, how do I do it? And I don't know the answer to that question. So again, I have to honestly say I'm not too thrilled with the concept, and I think that you can't ban them outright. So already we have an issue. Some days, I wonder about the state legislature, but that's a whole other story for another time. So I want to take this opportunity again to wish you all a very pleasant and joyous holiday season. And as I leave here, somewhat in an apparent fog, I guess I'm grateful for your confidence, and you folks are just simply fantastic. It's probably the best place, not probably, is the best place I've had the pleasure of living in. I've lived in a lot of places. You guys get it right, and you go Bonita, and I'm so thrilled to hear about the cards. That's fantastic. God bless you all, and a great new year. That's what we all need. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben. Any other public comment? All right, seeing none, motion to adjourn.
Second.
So moved.